Hello, this is Eric Michael Lloyd. I have a master's in psychology, a neuroscience concentration. Um, I just wanted to read a book, um, Science and Nature Writing, Steven Pinker. I have many books, not as many as some people, but a small library, and I like to read these books when I do get the chance. This series of the Best American Series 2004 is a writing by Phillip M. Boffey. Fearing the worst. Fearing the worst should anyone produce a cloned baby, from the New York Times. I'll be reading this probably for the second time, and some of this for the first time, as I haven't read the entire book, along with today. Experts increasingly suspect that a fringe cult's claim to have cloned a human baby is a publicity-seeking hoax, especially now that the group seems to be evading genetic tests that might prove its claim. The cult's deep-seated belief that space aliens created the human race by cloning is so wacko that all of its other claims become suspect. But with several renegade groups supposedly racing to produce the first cloned baby, it's almost inevitable that sooner or later someone will succeed. It's time to start preparing ourselves mentally for that eventuality. Until now, there has been widespread support in Congress for a ban on cloning to produce babies. The only real debate has been over the use of cloned embryos to find cures for disease. Even scientists who want to pursue therapeutic cloning have been happy to endorse a ban on reproductive cloning for safety reasons. Judging from animal tests, there is just too much risk that a cloned baby would be born with birth defects or face medical problems as it ages. I'm remembering Dolly, the sheep that they cloned, I think in the 90s, that also had similar concerns, similar issues with that. But if the renegade cloners ever present a healthy baby who is shown by genetic tests to be a cloned copy of an adult, the safety argument will become less persuasive. It will then be imperative to look much harder at the ethical and moral implications of reproductive cloning. The public fear and fascination with cloning, as expressed in popular culture, focuses on some highly improbable scenarios. The Boys from Brazil, a 1978 movie based on a novel, featured a plot by Nazi doctors to produce a cadre of young Hitler clones to start a Fourth Reich. Although the villains tried to give the young Hitlers the same home life as the original, the writers slid past the overwhelming probability that even Hitler himself, introduced into a different historical context, would not have the same career trajectory. The most recent Star Wars movie, last year's Attack of the Clones, featured an army of clones derived from the genes of an aggressive bounty hunter, modified to ensure willingness to follow military orders. The image of a horde of unthinking cloned attackers is a classic science fiction nightmare, but producing such an army with today's techniques would require a huge number of women to supply the eggs and bear the fetal clones to term, a problem that is often glossed over in horror stories. On a more individual scale, the new Star Trek movie, Nemesis, pits a good spaceship captain against his evil younger clone. The younger version went bad because of his harsh treatment, and when exiled to hellish mines on a remote world, a nice reminder that genes alone do not dictate destiny. Over the years, people have fretted that cloning practiced widely might eliminate the need for men. Women could bear children asexually, might exacerbate the male-female ratio. Cultures that revere males could clone only them and might reduce the genetic diversity that comes from mingling genes in sexual reproduction. But those scenarios suppose that cloning might indeed become the preferred means of reproduction, an event that would seem to require an unlikely mass change in human preferences or a totalitarian regime to impose its will. In a democratic free market society, commercial entities might well produce cloning, but such marketing has not turned in vitro fertilization or the freezing of bodies for later resurrection into mass commodities. Some critics fear that cloning could usher in a new eugenics in which nations or individuals might try to improve the average capabilities of the next generation by cloning the likes of an Einstein, Mozart, Michael Jordan, or Marilyn Monroe. Such genetic enhancement has in fact been endorsed by some eminent scientists in the past, and no doubt there are individuals who might want offspring with particular talents. Yet sperm banks with seed from famous and accomplished men have existed for some time with no sign of a mass rush to use them. In its report on human cloning last year, the President's Council on Bioethics worried that cloning to produce children could disrupt the normal relationships between generations and within families, could turn children into manufactured products rather than independent beings, and could put undue pressure on a cloned child living in the shadow of a genetically identical adult. Most of the panel's concerns were necessarily speculative, and some of its worries seem overdrawn. Twins seem to do just fine with the same genome, for example, so it is not clear that having a twin in a generation older would be all that burdensome. Nor is it clear that families with a clone child would face more confusing relationships than already exist in today's divorced, blended, and extended families. On the other hand, cloning could prove medically useful for couples worried about passing on genetic diseases, infertile individuals who could not have a biologically related child any other way, or parents needing a compatible tissue donor or to cure a sick child. For the immediate future, Congress would be wise to ban reproductive cloning as far too risky while allowing therapeutic cloning to proceed. But sooner or later, technical advances may diminish the risks. The nation needs to focus on what to do then. Thank you.